Yeah. But I think there's the thing that struck me when you were talking, right, is you were saying that you wanted to make people more flexible so that they wouldn't break, right?
Mm.
That's not too dissimilar to an engineer talking about a robot, right? Now, I'm definitely not saying that you're attempting to play God or anything like that. But what I feel is that we are aligning ourselves now in this era of humanity to it's almost like all the big problems are fixed. You know what I mean? Almost
Mm.
all of the big problems are fixed, right? In that you are going to live today and you're going to carry on with your work. And the imminent threat of a lion coming and eating you and your family is pretty small, right? So generally, we've fixed most of the big problems, right?
Yeah.
And it now feels like we're rising above our old station and squandering over these problems, almost the meta problem, the micro problems. Sorry, right? And one of those micro problems, as you say, is efficiency and trying to be as boisterous and as bolstered as possible as humans, right?
Mm. I mean, I could go on about first world problems for ages. I'm happy to
Sure.
talk about that too.
Sure.
um, who was it that I was having a conversation with? Um, oh, I can't remember now, but I listened to a really great interview yesterday with Sean. I forget his surname, but he's a former Navy SEAL, and he runs like a podcast or a YouTube channel called Vigilante something. And
Oh yes,
he
I've heard of this too.
debates for 2 hours with a liberal. He's a young dude, like very very like good debate, not like a hostile debate about demonetizing police and the whole police brutality and whatever type of thing.
Yeah.
And we're dealing with these. I think humans. I think as a society, we've stopped taking accountability for the things that we are doing wrong as individuals,
I have
right?
some thoughts on
And
this, yeah.
yeah, and we have like, I mean, one of the debates was the guy reached into the police officer's belt and took out his uh, gun. He thought it was the gun, but it was actually the taser. And the
Right.
police officer turned around and shot him, right? Which fucking right. Like, why would you reach, who in their right mind reaches in a police officer's belt and takes a weapon, right? You stole it. Am I supposed to depend on you tasering me and then not killing me? No, right? And then we have this huge uproar by society. Like, why did he get a shot? Well, wait a minute. Why? Can we take a step back and why did he take the weapon out of the bag? So we have this idea of like, yeah, we've solved all the big problems, and now we're focusing on these little pro. And I made a post about that as well. Like Instagram changed their policy the other day, and they started to include like gender pronouns. You could put gender pronouns on your profile, which is great. But it was on the same day that Palestine was being bombed by Israel.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I'm like, are we really that fucking concerned? Like, we pretend that we are so woke, we are so ahead of the game, that we're so inclusive of everything and everybody, but we're not, right? We live in these high GDP Western countries, UK, Canada, Australia,
The
US,
US.
New
Yeah.
Zealand, right? We are so removed from reality, it's not even funny, right?
Well, that's not quite true. What we're removed from is the reality of others, right?
Hmm.
The reality of a high GDP country is pretty similar across the board,
Yep.
in the same way that the pattern of life for a low GDP country is relatively similar. I think the accountability that you speak of when it comes to that reality is the understanding of how that reality came to be. Because generally, a country doesn't miraculously, magically make a high GDP. The
Yeah.
likelihood is they've either begged, borrowed, or stolen, or all of the above. certain
Possibly all of the
things that
above.
have a high GDP from countries that now seem to have a low GDP, right? So
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right that we have, in the hierarchy of problems, there are problems that should take a more prominent global position than a big tech company producing and pronouncing a change that allows people to change digital words to different digital words, right? For sure.
Mm.
However, Instagram should just crack on and do whatever they were doing, right? They obviously had a release schedule and that's fine. But as you say, the use of that platform could have been better utilized, and the use of everyone's platform could have been better utilized to shine light on something that, as we've just alluded to, should have a far more prominent standing in the global hierarchy of problems. The thing that makes me very pessimistic about these things is that the root of it is money, right? The way that I see it, the root of it is money. If we look at the coronavirus, for instance, and forget all of the stuff, but if we just look at one aspect of it, and that's that essentially the global community of clinicians and research doctors banded together, for good or for bad, right, and produced a vaccine in a time that was 5-6 times quicker than you'd expect a regular vaccine to be produced, right?
Yeah.
If we channeled, and the reason why that happened, in my opinion, is because there was money to be made, right? If you're Pfizer or if you're AstraZeneca or whatever, there is billions and billions of dollars for you to make by spending half that, right?
Yeah.
So it makes absolute sense to pull all of the resources you have into solving problem X. Well, if problem Y was Palestine, and we were able to pull the same amount of resources together to solve that problem, and we then multiplied those resources by a value of X and looked at Syria, right? I wonder what the world could be like.